It seems as if Caitlin Clark has turned down $20 million. $20 million in the WNBA. Y'all acting like y'all can't get a CBA done, turning down all this bread for y'all. Listen, Caitlin, you might need to start accepting some of these bags. You might need to start accepting some of these payments and bring your boy KTV on along for the ride at this point.
All right, so get this. That's not a typo, folks. Caitlin Clark has now reportedly turned down a staggering $20 million in offers from rival basketball leagues, all while the WNBA is still struggling to finalize their collective bargaining agreement. And honestly, based on what we're witnessing from the Indiana Fever's management right now, she might seriously be regretting that decision. Let's really dive deep into what she's walked away from, the reasoning behind it, and whether her unwavering loyalty to the WNBA is about to backfire on her in a truly spectacular way.
So let's get into the article. The nearly $20 million rejection by Caitlin Clark has the WNBA buzzing. Here it says, Caitlin Clark is the lone basketball player on Sportico's latest ranking of the highest paid female athlete. She has climbed into the number 6 spot with an estimated $16.1 million in total earnings, a number that came despite an injury-shortened campaign.
And that's why this story is so wild. Sportico recently unveiled their latest ranking of the highest paid female athletes, and guess who's sitting near the top? Caitlin Clark at number 3 with a massive $16.1 million in total earnings. She's the only basketball player on that entire prestigious list. But here's the truly remarkable part. She only played a mere 13 games last season. That was all due to an injury that the Fever management notoriously dragged out for months. Remember how that whole situation played out. We all waited through the entire offseason, through Unrivaled's 3-on-3 league, just counting down the days until the WNBA season finally kicked off. And then, we got just 13 games. That's it. For months. Every single day, the team kept telling us she was day to day, week after week, of the same incredibly vague updates. Then, with literally just 2 games left in the season, they finally admitted she was done for the year. The Fever, it seems, strung fans along for ticket sales and ratings, all while Caitlin sat on the bench. And the kicker? During that entire period, she was actively turning down offers that would have paid her more than most WNBA players will earn in their entire careers.
Season had to get through the 3-on-3 unrivaled, whatever, just to get to the season, and she only plays 13 games. We're being told every day that she's day-to-day for months and months on end, all the way until there's only the last week of the season. Is 2 games left, and they say she's done for the year. Dragged us along all season. So here it says her WNBA salary at $119,000 barely registers in comparison to the endorsement revenue powering her rise.
So, despite all that love and hype, her actual WNBA salary is a shocking $119,000. Let me just repeat that, $119,000. That's what the league that constantly claims to value her so highly pays for an entire season of play. The other $16 million, that comes entirely from endorsement deals. Companies like Nike, Gatorade, and State Farm, corporate America, they recognized her immense value instantly. The WNBA, on the other hand, seems to still be figuring out how to spell collective bargaining agreement. This situation creates a truly unique scenario that almost no young athlete ever gets to experience. Caitlin Clark doesn't actually need basketball to be financially secure. She doesn't need extra seasons, additional leagues, or any more mileage on her body. At just 23 years old, she's already set for life. And that incredible financial independence is precisely why she keeps saying no to offers that would genuinely make most other professional athletes completely faint.
Now, we've seen Unrivaled. Unrivaled gave Sabrina Ionescu $1 million for the inaugural season. You know they was offering Caitlin Clark more than they was offering Sabrina Ionescu. I love me some Sabrina. But they definitely was offering Caitlin Clark the whole cake, icing, and then some. So she turned that down. We know Project B came with a eye-dropping, crazy number. We know they came with a crazy bag, and she has turned it down left and right. And we can't even forget that Ice Cube came with a bag. So she's been turning down leagues left and right since before she even played a game in her rookie season.
Let's kick things off with Unrivaled, the new 3-on-3 league that launched this past offseason. They reportedly offered Sabrina Ionescu a cool $1 million for their inaugural season. But here's the kicker, they offered Caitlin even more than that. Plus equity in the league itself, and she declined immediately, without hesitation. Now, what's really fascinating about that timeline is this. Unrivaled didn't just accept her no and move on. Instead, they kept dragging it out publicly, dropping hints and deliberately creating speculation that maybe, just maybe, she'd change her mind. It was week after week of will she or won't she content, until finally, Caitlin herself had to step in and shut it down completely. She had to publicly tell them to stop using her name for promotional purposes, simply because she wasn't going to be playing in their league. And let's be real, that's not normal behavior. When a player declines an offer, teams don't typically spend months pretending they might still land them. But Unrivaled clearly understood something crucial. Caitlin Clark's name alone drives massive engagement, even when she's not physically participating. Just the possibility of her involvement was worth more than most players' actual presence.
Any other league, she's making so much money off the court in endorsements. Robin Lundberg summed it up. Salute to Robin Lundberg. Turning down opportunities that most players would chase. This is not the first offseason in which Clark faced pressure to take on more. After her rookie year, Unrivaled approached her with a package worth $1 million plus equity for a short stint. She declined immediately. So she declined immediately. And y'all remember Unrivaled was dragging it on and on and on and on, trying to pretend like she was going to be in it to the point where she had to step in and put a stop to it. Like, okay, enough's enough. Stop using my name for this. I'm not playing in the league. Stop. She had to step in and do that herself. Here it says.
Then there's Project B, another upstart league launching in 2026, which already has her Fever teammates, Sophie Cunningham and Kelsey Mitchell, signed on. The reported offers there stretch into the millions annually, with multi-year commitments potentially reaching a total of 8 figures. Yes, you heard that right. $10 million or more over the life of the contract, plus equity. Caitlin said no to that one as well. But perhaps the most absolutely eye-popping rejection came before she even played a single professional game. Ice Cube's Big 3 League made a highly publicized offer. We're talking $5 million for just 8 games, not 8 weeks, but 8 games. That's a staggering $65,000. And according to multiple reports, if she had committed to their full 10-week season, they would have pushed that number to an incredible $15 million for 10 weeks of work. That figure alone would have exceeded her entire earnings for 2024. And she turned it down without a moment's hesitation. The primary issue was timing. The Big 3 season runs during the summer, directly conflicting with the WNBA season. Joining would have meant competing in 2 leagues simultaneously while also learning the ropes of professional basketball for the very first time. But still, $15 million for just 10 weeks? Most people, you'd think, would have absolutely found a way to make that work.
We schedule a week ahead and schedule a week in advance. And if it's gonna shut down, then we need to shut everything down. Hopefully we can continue to work with our players that are injured because we have a lot of them in market as well. But it's very difficult being in limbo. It's very difficult when you're talking to your staff and you don't really know anything. But at the same time, it's part of the growing process of our league. We certainly understand that as our staff is mostly former players. We understand that as well. But being in limbo is difficult.
Yeah. Well, like you said, the other thing the CBA will decide is stuff like the core. Will they have core designation? So I'm sure that goes into all your planning. So can you plan? Can you even start to game plan for what you want to get on your roster?
I think we can game plan for what we'd like to have,
So, the big question is, why does she keep saying no to all these massive offers? Caitlin has been incredibly consistent about her reasoning from day one. She grew up watching the WNBA, with Maya Moore as her absolute favorite player, and her clear goal is to become a WNBA great. She doesn't just want to be a basketball player who happened to play in the WNBA. There's a significant difference there. Playing in the Big 3, Unrivaled, or Project B certainly would have been highly lucrative, no doubt. But it simply wouldn't have advanced her ultimate legacy in the league she genuinely cares about. And with a staggering $16 million in endorsements already locked in, she simply doesn't need to chase every single check that gets waved in her direction. That incredible level of financial security grants her something truly rare in the world of professional sports: the ability to make decisions purely based on what she wants, not what she needs. She can comfortably turn down $15 million from Ice Cube because, quite frankly, she doesn't need $15 million from Ice Cube. But here's where the whole situation gets incredibly complicated. That deep loyalty she has to the WNBA inherently assumes that the WNBA is in return going to take care of her. And honestly, right now, there's absolutely zero evidence that this is actually happening.
Like financially, we have a young core, so that will certainly impact, our ability to make certain moves in free agency. I'm glad I'm not the GM. I can tell you that. From a timing standpoint, how much time there will be to adjust, what it's going to look like, roster spots, roster management, not just what it looks like financially. How many players are we going to have on a roster? What is it going to look like for us? We can't just think in the terms of 1 year. What's it going to look like for us in the next 3 years? What can it look like in the next 3 years? What can it look like in the next 5 years? So I think the buffer of when we would have normally had, a 3 to 4 week time frame to look at it is not going to be there. So we're going to have to make decisions quickly. Our ability to sort of anticipate what might come down the pipe is not there. So hopefully we'll be able to respond instead of react in a timely manner.
Now, let's really listen to what people like Stephanie White and Sue Bird are saying about where the Fever stand with these crucial CBA negotiations. They're essentially operating week to week because they literally have no idea if their entire operations are going to shut down. They can't plan for free agency because they don't even know what the salary cap will look like. They can't even confirm how many roster spots they'll have for next season. Stephanie White, quite frankly, straight up says she's glad she's not the general manager because the timeline is so incredibly compressed that they're going to be forced to react instead of strategically respond. That's not a plan, people. That's absolute chaos. And this is the very organization that's supposed to be expertly building around the biggest star the league has ever seen. The player who turned down a staggering $20 million to stay loyal to the WNBA. The player whose jersey sales and ratings have absolutely shattered every record in league history. The Fever can't even get through an offseason without admitting they're completely operating in limbo. Here's what makes this whole situation profoundly significant. Caitlin Clark has demonstrated unprecedented loyalty to a league that hasn't figured out how to properly compensate her, protect her health, or even finalize their basic labor agreement. She's turned down roughly $20 million in outside offers because she deeply believes in the WNBA's long-term vision. But what is that vision exactly? Because from an outsider's perspective, it frankly looks like pure dysfunction. The CBA negotiations have dragged on for so long that teams literally can't plan for next season. The Indiana Fever, the team with arguably the most valuable player in league history, is scheduling week to week and just hoping they don't have to shut down operations entirely. Stephanie White openly admits they're going to be forced to make rushed decisions without the normal 3 to 4 week planning window they need. This is the shaky infrastructure that Caitlin chose over a $15 million payday from the big. This is the organization she's betting her entire legacy on. Now let's circle back to what she actually endured last season. She played a mere 13 games. The Fever initially announced she was day-to-day with an ankle injury and then proceeded to give that exact same vague update for months. Every single week, the same ambiguous statement, she's day-to-day, we're evaluating her progress, we'll know more soon. Fans bought tickets expecting to see her play. National TV slots were scheduled specifically around Fever games. And week after week, she sat on the bench while the team stubbornly refused to just admit she was done for the season. They strung it along until there were literally only 2 games left, then finally announced she wouldn't return. That, my friends, isn't player management. That's a calculated ticket sales strategy. And Caitlin went along with it because she's a team player who trusts the organization. But the real question is, should she trust them? Because here's what that injury situation glaringly revealed. The Fever will prioritize revenue over transparency every single time. They knew she wasn't coming back. Medical staff doesn't go from day to day to season ending overnight. That progression takes weeks of careful evaluation. They knew, and they kept selling false hope. Meanwhile, Unrivaled was offering her $1 million plus equity just to play 3-on-3 basketball in a climate-controlled facility with half the physical demands of a full WNBA season. Project B was offering multi-year security with an 8-figure guarantee. The Big Three was offering more per game than she makes in an entire WNBA season, and she said no to all of it because she wanted to be available for the Fever, the very same Fever that dragged out her injury status purely for ticket sale. Now contrast that with how other elite athletes handle these kinds of situations. When Kevin Durant received massive overseas offers during NBA lockouts, he seriously considered them because the NBA's dysfunction wasn't his problem to solve. When players in other leagues get lowballed, they strategically leverage competing offers to force their current league to pay market value. Caitlin, however, is doing the exact opposite. She's absorbing significant financial losses to demonstrate loyalty to a league that pays her a paltry $119,000, all while she generates millions in revenue. Her jersey outsells everyone's, her games draw triple the normal ratings, attendance spikes whenever she plays, and her compensation remains unhindered. The endorsement money is fantastic, yes, but that's not coming from the WNBA. That's Nike and Gatorade recognizing her value independent of the league. The WNBA itself is paying her rookie scale, take it or leave it. So when people say she doesn't have a financial need to play in other leagues, that's technically true, but it completely misses the much larger point. She shouldn't have to exclusively rely on endorsements to make real substantial money. The league she's generating all this immense value for should absolutely be paying her appropriately, and perhaps the new CBA might change that. There's talk of higher salary caps, the elimination of the core designation that restricts player movement, expanded rosters, and better revenue sharing. All of that sounds truly great in theory, but the CBA still isn't done. They're negotiating in the off-season when teams should be actively planning for next year. And even when it does finally get finalized, there's no guarantee that Caitlin's compensation will truly reflect her actual value to the league. WNBA salary structures simply don't work like that. There's no max contract that pays superstars relative to their revenue generation, which of course brings us right back to those $20 million in rejected offers. Was turning them down the right move from a legacy perspective? Probably, yeah. If Caitlin had split time between the WNBA and Big Three during her rookie season, the immediate narrative would have been that she was just chasing money instead of single-mindedly focusing on becoming a truly great professional player. If she'd played in Unrivaled this past offseason, critics would have argued she was prioritizing a startup league over the WNBA. She's strategically protecting her reputation and her deep relationship with the league she grew up loving, and that certainly has value beyond just monthly checks. But from a purely practical perspective, she's leaving an enormous amount of money on the table while the WNBA is still trying to figure out basic operational questions. The Fever can't even tell their coach how many roster spots they'll have next season. That's not a temporary problem, that's a fundamental structural dysfunction that's going to keep creating chaos. And here's the thing that absolutely should worry Caitlin. The WNBA's problems aren't suddenly getting solved faster simply because she's being patient. If anything, her willingness to accept the status quo inadvertently removes pressure from the league to actually fix things. Why would they rush to increase salaries when their biggest star is already turning down outside offers to stay? She's in essence negotiating against herself by demonstrating that no amount of money from competing leagues will ever pull her away. That's undeniably admirable loyalty, but it's an absolutely terrible leverage strategy. The smarter play might have been to actually take one of those offers. Not to genuinely leave the WNBA, but to force them to respond. Imagine signing with Project B for their 2026 launch, then telling the WNBA they need to make it truly worth her while to stay, using that outside interest as leverage to demand better compensation, improved injury protocols, and greater organizational competence. Instead, she's turned everything down and simply hoped the WNBA will reward that loyalty. And so far, they've rewarded it with a dragged-out injury situation, a stalled CBA negotiation, and a paltry... Now look, I totally understand the argument that she's playing the long game. Build her legacy in the WNBA first, establish herself as one of the all-time greats, and then leverage that into whatever comes next. Maybe she starts her own league, or becomes a part owner of a WNBA franchise, or perhaps the endorsement money just keeps growing to the point where her basketball salary becomes utterly irrelevant. All of that is certainly possible. but it explicitly requires the WNBA to actually get its act together. It requires the Fever to build a truly competent organization around her. It requires the league to finalize a CBA that properly compensates its stars, and right now, absolutely none of that is happening. So the crucial question becomes, at what point does loyalty become naive? At what point should Caitlin look at the sheer dysfunction surrounding her and say, you know what, maybe I should have taken that $15 million from Ice Cube? Because here's what's almost certainly going to happen, the CBA will eventually get done, probably with incremental improvements that don't fundamentally change how the league operates. The Fever will continue operating in chaos, because that's simply what they do. Caitlin will keep generating massive revenue while being paid a mere fraction of her actual value, and in 5 years, will likely be having the exact same conversation about whether she should have leveraged her position when she had maximum negotiating power. She's only 23 years old, and she's already the biggest draw in women's basketball history. She will never have more leverage than she has right now, and she's choosing not to use it because she genuinely loves the WNBA, and desperately wants to see it succeed. That's either the most incredibly admirable thing in professional sports, or it's a massive generational miscalculation that's going to cost her dearly. Time will tell which one it is. But if I were Caitlin Clark, I'd be watching how the Fever handled my injury last season. I'd be watching how the league is completely botching this CBA negotiation. And I'd be starting to seriously wonder if loyalty is truly a two-way street, because right now, it's looking pretty one-sided. What do you think? Should Caitlin have taken one of those lucrative offers to force the WNBA's hand? Or is she playing this exactly right by betting on the league's long-term growth? Drop your take in the comments below, and if you made it this far, definitely hit that subscribe button, because we're going to keep following this developing story as the CBA situation unfolds.